ties that we have with North Carolina. So Chicago Scots is very excited for the year ahead. A couple of wonderful things that will be of interest to this audience. Certainly our games in June 12, 13, because of the Inverary and District Pipe Band coming to Chicago. They are the four-time world champion. This was about 5 years in the making to get them to come. And the pipers from across the country have signed up to come. So it really is going to be a wonderful evening. They are going to do 2 concerts off-site. The first one sold out in under 10 minutes, a 1,000-person performance sold out in under 10 minutes. And through some wonderful negotiation, they are going to do a second performance. You are the first to hear about it. So that should be announced soon. So if that's of interest, please come join us. We also will salute veterans as our honored clan, and we're looking to have the tartan from every branch of military service represented in the color guard, in the formality, in our parade of clans this year. So veterans will be our honored clan. That's wonderful news. Phil Long, the CEO of the National Trust, Gus Noble is on the board of the U.S. Foundation. We have a very close relationship with them through the reciprocal membership that I mentioned to Catherine, and Shusa does offer as well. We're honored that he's stopping in Chicago. He's bringing a patrons group here. And the Burns Project, which is the award-winning one-man show that was presented at the Fringe Festival, is making 3 U.S. stops. And one will be in Chicago in March. And that's a small production. It really is like around a dinner table. So it's 40 or fewer people. And they will do 2 performances, and that's nearly sold out as well. So Scottish history still celebrated a lot by Chicago Scots and Caledonia Senior Living, planning for the future. Our future master plan is still in the works. We have very dedicated committees of our board that are working hard on that. So we're excited. Perhaps you saw last Sunday's newspaper, the headline for the Herald was the Scottish government announcing the 18 international grants that they were for 26, and Chicago Scots, it was in the headline for Caledonia Senior Living. And we were very excited. It was our first grant from Scottish Connections ever. So we're quite thrilled. So that's my update, Connie. And thank you to everyone who's on this call. And John Manchester, I want to let you know, we have a new head for the clans at our Chicago Scots, a veteran of the games at Grandfather Mountain and Loch Lomond in North Carolina. And he intends to grow clan participation based on those clan-centric events. So I'm very excited about the wonderful new chair we have. That introduction comes next week, John. So you are the first to hear about it.
Great to hear about it.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. You're going to like him very much. Thank you, Connie.
Okay. Excellent updates, Dawn. Thank you so much. And also next month, I'd just like to remind everybody that on March 14th, we're going to have Professor Dawn Nurbass from the Department of History and Classical Studies at McGill University in Montreal, Quebec. And he's going to be discussing the Scottish factor in Cape Breton, is it Britain? Britain's coal mining communities. So this promises to be a very interesting topic. in addition to being able to dialogue with a scholar from Montreal, Canada. So I hope you'll all join us for this next month. And now, as I had promised everybody last month, Catherine Fort is going to share a little bit about Moores Creek with us today prior to Dawn's presentation. So Catherine, you have the floor next, please.
Okay, thank you, Connie. Yeah, I just want to let everybody know that in 2 weeks, we'll be all gathering at Moores Creek to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Moores Creek, which was February 27th, 1776. I often refer to it as one of the most important battles of the Revolutionary War that no one's ever heard of. Because it was a small battle, and it was could have been very insignificant and forgotten about, but because it was a Patriot victory when the Patriots really needed a victory, it is considered to be pivotal in changing the course of the war in the South, particularly. And so we'll be celebrating that. It's going to be a 3-day event. The Scottish Society of Wilmington has traditionally provided lunch for the volunteers on the main day, and it's usually about 75. This year it's 250. So, so it's we fortunately were able to partner with a caterer with a company to get the food, because my cousin said, Brunswick stew for 250? No, I can't do that. Sorry. So we're going to have a great time out there. There's lots of activities. Friday is the main day when we'll be doing the actual wreath laying ceremony. And then Saturday will be filled with other activities, programs, living historians, and they don't reenact the battle because they don't want to rip apart the bridge again. But they do battle demonstrations throughout the course of the weekend. So if you're in North Carolina, come on down, or plan to come on down, because this really will be an historic event. The Scottish Society is also sponsoring the visit of Diana Gabaldon at this event, so she will be there throughout the weekend. So
very cool.
Yeah, we're excited about it. It's
anybody planning to be there that's on the call today?
Don's going to be there.
I figured.
And we'll also have a couple of representatives, a couple of descendants of Alan and Flora MacDonald. And Alan was the nominal commander of the Loyalist troops, although he was ill and missed the battle. So it's the first time that we know of that descendants of the MacDonalds will actually be there for this ceremony.
Oh, well, gee, I'm
That's
feeling very envious.
Wonderful. I hope you have good coverage on social media so we might see things. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Catherine, thank you for letting the North Carolina Presbyterian Historical Society trash your tent, as well as a few St. Andrews people.
We're happy to have you.
Okay, well, wonderful, Catherine. I wish I could be there. I cannot, but I would love. I'd love to get a recap. So it sounds exciting, very exciting. Okay, well, on that happy note, I think we're ready to move forward with our presentation today. We are so pleased to have historian Donald C. McLeod with us. He's returning to us on popular demand, of course. And Don's going to speak to us today about John, is it Bethune, Don? Am I pronouncing?
Bethune.
John Bethune, Loyalist chaplain in the American Revolution and father of Presbyterianism in Canada. And I often receive requests for speakers to talk about religion history, Scottish religion history. And so here you are. We're providing this for you today. So Dawn, I think we're ready to turn it over to you. I'd like to ask everybody to mute your mics and dim your cameras, and I'll help you do that. But Dawn, you have the floor, and welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Get my chair adjusted here. Could everyone see the entire map of North Carolina?
Yes, we can. Looks great.
Okay, I'm still seeing people's faces on mine.
We've got the slide on most of the screen and just a column of faces on the far right, but it's big and it looks good, Don.
Okay. Here's a outline of North Carolina. There are 100 counties in North Carolina. When the Scottish Highland immigration is shown on the map on the left, there are about 10 counties of that 100 that were settled predominantly by the Highland Scots. And this area is in the south central, a little bit to the eastern part of the state. And if you go into these areas now and look in the phone book, you see a lot of Macs, many more so than in the rest of the state. The area we're talking about today, if you can see the Fayetteville, I've got my arrow on Fayetteville, Southern Pines, up to Sanford. The area we're speaking of today is in the Sandhills, so-called Sandhills, in this right in the middle part of the state. It's in the western left part of the Gaeltacht, Gaels, Gallic, Talk, land, Gallic, the Gallic territory. So it's in the left side over here. Take a few facts of John Bethune. A name you do see occasionally is Bethune, B-E-A-T-O-N, which is a derivative of Bethune. The Bethunes apparently originated in Normandy, in Flanders, and moved to Scotland. There are a lot of Bethunes in Fife, and there's a lot of Bethunes in the Highlands, and they're referred to as the medical Bethunes. Many of them are physicians and ministers over the last several centuries. John Bethune, born on the Isle of Skye, he's in a very poor family. He managed to scrape together some scholarship money, so to speak, to attend King's College in Aberdeen, and he was licensed to preach. As soon as he got licensed, actually gave him his license early because he was ready to set sail for the New World. 1973, he sailed to North Carolina. On the ship with John Bethune was Flora McDonald and her family. And they settled in this central part of North Carolina, which we will be seeing slides and talking about today. Bethune had his home with his parents on McLeod's Creek near Carthage. He formed a couple of churches in North Carolina, was in the Battle of Moores Creek as a chaplain, had a military career, and basically wound up in the prison at Philadelphia after Moores Creek and then became a Canadian. And that's the story we will be looking at today. Here is the first church that he founded. It's Mount Carmel. This is the building from about the Civil War period. And if you notice, there are mostly the monuments, the newer ones look modern, but the original ones are just field stones. My ancestors who immigrated about 1820 are under some of those stones. The records of the church were burned 100 years ago. Who's under which stone, nobody knows. I created a new monument for my immigrant ancestors and placed it near the old church. That whole corner there are McLeod stones. So I have a lot of great uncles and aunts and grandparents buried right there. Here's the current Mount Carmel Church. Not particularly interesting, but John Bethune helped found another church, probably about 20 miles away, called Ben Salem Presbyterian Church. It's a more modern building. It started off, all these old churches started off as meeting houses, typically with a brush arbor, pine limbs, things just keep the snow and the rain off. The next step was the log cabin, or maybe even second generation of log cabin. And then 2 or 3 more generations, they wound up with these modern churches. So these are the 2 churches that are really attributed to John Bethune in North Carolina. Here are 2 state highway markers near Carthage, not far from Mount Carmel Church and Ben Salem Church. One recognizes John Bethune as an early pastor of the Scots in North Carolina, mentions Moores Creek, and in fact, he went to Canada and started churches there. Another interesting person is the historic sign is very close to John Bethune's sign. It's John McCrae. Bethune talked John McCrae into immigrating to North Carolina. McCrae was a famous Gaelic poet in Scotland. He was well known, well published, and Bethune talked him into coming to North Carolina. Well, Bethune and McCrae got caught up in the Revolution, Moores Creek story. McCrae had a pretty miserable time, wound up at Moores Creek, and later wound up at the Battle of Kings Mountain, and went back to Scotland later. But here are 2 Scottish historic people close together in Moore County in North Carolina. Another famous person is Flora MacDonald. Most of you probably know at least a little bit of the story of Flora. Her family were not Jacobites. They were on the Isle of Skye. They did not participate in the Jacobite Revolution in 1745-46, but they had Jacobite sympathies. This is something not understood. Most of the clans did not participate, were not present at Culloden. Most of the clans were not there. There were only a few clans there. Most of the clans did not support the Jacobite rebellion. Hardly any of the Lowland Scots did. And Prince Charles Edward Stuart had hoped he could even get English people to join the rebellion. That totally flopped. Flora wound up, after the Battle of Culloden, rescuing the prince, saving his life, really, getting him through the Isle of Skye over to Isle of Raasay, where he later crossed back into the mainland of Scotland and escaped to France. So she was the most famous woman in Europe for years. She was imprisoned in the Tower of London, released, and times were hard in Scotland. Farming was bad, weather was bad. A lot of the lairds, the chiefs of the clans, were telling people to leave, and the MacDonalds left. They were wealthy people at one point, but had been reduced almost to poverty with the farming famines, lost most of their cattle and so forth. So Flora set out for North Carolina. Interesting, when Samuel Johnson and James Boswell did their tour of the Hebrides about 1773 or so, they were on the Isle of Skye, met Flora, met the MacDonalds, met the chief of McLeod there, and they went to a party where the dancing was fierce. Everybody was just in constant motion, the entire field, the room of dancers. And the dance, they called it America. And it kind of represented the fever that was in the people for immigration. And sure enough, that happened. Here came Flora, John Bethune on the same ship, and John McCrae soon after. On the this is about 5 miles from the Mount Carmel Church. Is Flora McDonald's Spring. This was near the plant. This was on the plantation site on Cheeks Creek. This is about a mile hike up the mountain there to get to the spring. So this spring is still there. That's Flora Spring on the site of the former McDonald plantation. These are just representative of some of the old Scottish cemeteries in the Sandhills and the Piedmont of North Carolina. You encounter these in the woods. Suddenly you're hiking in the woods and you see 10, 12, 15, 20 tombstones. This particular one in Montgomery County, not far from Mount Carmel Church, you probably won't be able to read this, but it's to Malcolm Bethune. I don't know if he's related to John Bethune or not. I don't really know his history. I think the death was 1820 or so. And in all those, in the Mount Carmel Cemetery, there are Bethunes. In the old Scottish cemetery near Carthage, the first person buried there was Peter Bethune, who was a nephew, I think, of John Bethune. So the Bethunes were prominent. There are quite a few Bethunes in the area at one time. Moores Creek was a family affair. Flora, her husband, Alan particularly was one of the leaders in recruiting Highlanders as loyalists in the Loyalist troops. Flora's son-in-law, Alexander McLeod, had married Anne, Flora's and Alan's daughter. They had 2 or 3 children. And Alexander McLeod was from Glendale on the Isle of Skye. And his plantation near Carthage was called Glendale. It's currently a housing development there now, but I've chosen to call this development Glendale. But Alexander was busy helping Alan MacDonald recruit Highlanders for the march down to Moores Creek. So this whole thing was really a family affair. One little book I have, if you can see that, roster of Loyalists at the Battle of Moores Creek. In there are 25 McLeods and 28 McDonalds. they were there in big number. Well, as the revolution got underway, there was a big Tory or Loyalist rendezvous near Carthage. And this was a home of Alexander Morrison near Carthage. Carthage is in Moore County, right in the middle of North Carolina, pretty much. So the Highlanders mustered here for this rendezvous to go down to Cross Creek, which is now called Fayetteville. They marched down to Fayetteville, which is about 25 miles away, and about 1,000 Highlanders mustered there at Cross Creek. Flora appeared, gave cheers, exhortation, wished her husband goodbye, and the Highland troops prepared to march off to Moores Creek. Here's Moores Creek. This is the new bridge over Moores Creek. The creek is about 40 or 50 feet wide, 3 or 4 feet deep. And this is where the battle took place, February 27, 1776. The Highlanders had to march over this bridge. They thought the Patriot militias had retreated. They had not. The militias were dug in or entrenched over here. They had a cannon, affectionately called Mother Covington, plus a couple of other smaller cannons. And as the Highlanders tried to come across the bridge, the planks had been removed and the girders greased, so it's very difficult. Only one person at a time could really come across one of the girders. Colonel Donald McLeod led the troops. Brigadier General MacDonald was ill. He had been at Culloden. He is at the Battle of Culloden. And he had seen firsthand how firepower was really a destroyer of a Highland charge. He knew that. He was opposed to the charge here, but he was sick, he was ill, he was in a tent, could hardly communicate. And the younger officers demanded a fight. So they stormed the bridge here. Cannons went off. The militia were firing. 20 or 30 Highlanders were killed quickly, and the rout began. The battle was over in 10 minutes. So that was the Battle of Moores Creek. And as Catherine said, that the 250th anniversary is coming up 27th of this month. These are some Loyalist reenactors at Moores Creek. There are plenty of Patriot reenactors too. I thought it was interesting to see this Loyalist group. They meet, they go to 3 or 4 things a year as Loyalists. And here's one of the state park guides with his Loyalist outfit on. Let's talk about been talking about the Loyalists, but the left plaque here is in Fayetteville. Fayetteville was really the center point of the Highland clan, of the Highland people. And that's where they mustered to march off down to Moores Creek. Moores Creek was they had to go down the Cape Fear River. The Patriots prevented them from crossing the river, so they kind of stood off each other all the way down to Moores Creek, where the Loyalists could finally cross. And that's where the battle occurred. This is Liberty Point in Fayetteville. There was a big rally there of Patriots right near the very same site that the Highlanders had rallied to go off to Moores Creek. To illustrate, these were really Highland Scot. There were a lot of Highland Scots at Liberty Point, as well as at going down to Moores Creek. Here's a monument at New Hope Presbyterian Church, north of Chapel Hill. This was a Highland Scot church. These were not Highlanders. And here's a list of the people who were patriots from that one church in the Revolution. It shows you the difference in the thinking about the Revolution in terms of the Highland Scots and the Scots-Irish. The Scots-Irish had left Scotland because of hatred for the British. The British Crown had encouraged them to go to Northern Ireland, gave them farms, then increased the rents, put on tariffs that prevented them from trading to the colonies, were tariffs that made goods so high, so expensive, they could hardly sell into England, back into England. The Crown had suppressed the Presbyterian Church. Presbyterian priests couldn't marry, all kinds of things. And the Scots-Irish got mad, said, we're going to America. And they particularly came into the Delaware River, Philadelphia, and then came down through the mountains into the Carolinas. But this is one church, just showing you how many people were in the Revolution as patriots. Big difference. And the Highlanders had left. Culloden wasn't a big thing. It was 30 years ago when the Highlanders started coming. They'd almost forgotten it. The British Crown had recreated Highland regiments, kilted Highland regiments. Some of the Highlanders had participated in the French and Indian War on the British side and had developed a respect for things British. So the attitude of these two groups of people was decidedly different. The Highlanders left because of poverty, of bad chiefs, bad lairds. The Scots-Irish left because of bad policies of the British Crown. Two different motivations. Well, after Moore's Creek, John Bethune was captured, imprisoned in Philadelphia, later released, paroled, and basically he went to Canada. For a number of years, he had various functions as chaplain in the British battalions in Nova Scotia and Canada. And finally, he settled into Montreal in 1786. And he founded the Gabriel Street Presbyterian, which is now First Presbyterian in Montreal. Most of his members were former Loyalists, many of them from the States who had come to Canada, who had fled the States and went to Canada. They were referred to as United Empire Loyalists. He was there about a year and moved to Williamston, which is in the Glengarry settlement area in Scotland. And there he was given 3,000 acres. Chaplain in the military was considered the same as, I forget, a captain or something in terms of property rights. He started the church at Williamston, Lancaster, Martintown, Cornwall, in this part of this Glengarry settlement. And Dawn, I noticed you mentioned the Glengarry Pike Band is coming to Chicago. Well, the Glengarry was settled heavily by Scots. There's an interesting little book by John Kenneth Galbraith. It's called The Scotch. John Kenneth Galbraith was a famous economist and grew up in the Glengarry area. The book is quite a charming book, describing what the people were like, what the ministers and the churches, and what the whole attitude toward things were. It's a charming little book, and I enjoyed very much reading it. Bethune had a interesting relationship with the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church. He got along quite well with the Anglicans. Two of his sons even were trained in the Anglican churches there, became Anglican ministers, and one became the president of, gosh, I'm dropping the name of the university, of one of the universities there, which was an Anglican university. And he had a little different relationship with the Catholics. He warned his parishioners, he says, avoid the Catholics like snakes. He didn't have such an ecumenical view to the Catholics, although he got along well with them. There was a Marriage Act in Canada, 1793. Until then, Presbyterians could not marry people. It was kind of like the old thing back in Northern Ireland. The official church was the Anglican Church, and it was 1793 before the Presbyterians could fully marry people and have all the rights to do that. John Bethune preached on. He was at Glengarry, those Glengarry churches for, 35 years probably, 30 years at least. He was a chaplain in the War of 1812 of again, Great Britain versus the United States. He was a Canadian chaplain on the British side in the War of 1812. He had 9 children, six boys, and they all went on to important positions, like prominent in the Hudson Bay Company, different shipping lines, fur companies, and so forth. Here's a sketch of John Bethune. Here's his home in Williamston, Canada, which is now Ontario. They really didn't have the word Ontario back then. Ontario was called Upper Canada. This is in Ontario now. And the home, when Bethune died, the home was bought by Thompson. Thompson was one of those great Canadian voyageurs, people like Alexander Mackenzie, for example. Fraser was another. Thompson. They reached the Pacific Ocean before Lewis and Clark made it. They had already mapped out Western Canada. Thompson was a great cartographer, had mapped out Western Canada, had been all the way to the mouth of the Columbia River, and this was all before Lewis and Clark. So Thompson bought Bethune's house. One of Bethune's great-grandsons was Norman Bethune. He was a surgeon, trained in Toronto, a thoracic surgeon. He was the first the first person to seriously make the political case for national health insurance. This was back before World War II. He made the case that everyone should be covered, that there should be a national policy of health care. When World War II broke out, he took his thoracic surgery skills first to Spain, supporting the cause there against Generalissimo Franco. He pioneered setting up surgical hospitals that could infuse blood on the front line. Then as World War II got underway, he took the same skill to China. China was our ally then, fighting Japan. And he took the skill to China and set up numerous field hospitals to care for the Chinese who were being really pretty well beaten up by the Japanese. He was so revered in China that until the mid-50s, 1950s, every Chinese child in school studied about Norman Bethune. They all knew his name, what it is. And Canada finally got national health insurance. Remarkable man. Christopher Plummer is an ancestor of John Bethune. And here's a stamp honoring Norman Bethune, the thoracic surgeon. These are some of the camellias in my yard. This is a Professor Sargent, a beautiful camellia. These are Nuccio cameos from last year. We've had a little snow and really some cold weather this year. This is a few days ago. Ignore the photo on the right. But all my camellias that were in bloom got whacked. But I still have a lot of buds that will come along. Well, that's the end of the presentation. I'll be happy to have comments, questions.
Well, wonderful, wonderful, Don. Gosh, thank you for that. That was very interesting and enlightening. I would like to open the floor to discussion and questions for Don, please.
Has become a new symbol.
And I think we've got somebody who needs to mute their mic, probably.
Don, your camellias are beautiful. We'll have to talk about that. My grandmother actually hybridized camellias. They were her favorite flower.
Dan,
I have a couple of family intersections on the same topic. I had my Adamson ancestors came over in 1870 and identified as Presbyterians, but I have a great grandfather whose name was Sly, who came over early and was in Rhode Island, and then were Loyalists and went to Quebec. So, who then married in a Scots-Irish McCorrison family, and then it's amazing how all these family ties can go back and forth between the United States and Canada.
Yes.
To this day, my grandfather was born in Canada, but I can't trace back whether his ancestors were Loyalists, probably settled in upper New York State, and he may have been born in Plattsburgh, New York, but he definitely grew up in North Gower, near Ottawa.
Well, it's interesting. There were a lot of Loyalists in New York. It was kind of a gathering point because New York, particularly New York City, was under British control till well after they signed the peace treaty. So it was really a haven for Loyalists, and it was a launching point for a lot of the Southern Loyalists. Would go to New York and then go to Canada or somewhere else. There are actual organizations in Canada, Loyalist organizations that have meetings and occasions and exchange literature about, intend to learn more about that. There were about 100,000 Loyalists who left the United States during or after the Revolution. A lot of them went to Canada, a lot went back to England, Scotland, went to the Caribbean and different places. But there were a lot of people left. A lot of people lost their lands, farms, and were disenfranchised for their loyalism.
So obviously Loyalists are loyal to Britain. What was Bethune's cause or desire to be a Loyalist? What's the history there? Why did he choose that?
Well, they were the Highlanders in North Carolina. Most of them were newly immigrants. There were a huge number that came from the Isle of Skye in the early 70s. They had barely gotten settled, had barely gotten something to call a home when the revolution broke out. They were so happy to get a couple of 100 acres of land. They'd been farming on 5 or 6 or 10 acres in Scotland, didn't own it. They were tenants. And to come to America to get 200 acres of land, blessed by the King of England, why the hell give that up? Why jeopardize that for some revolution they didn't even feel they were part of? They were still Scots. They were Scots in America. They weren't Americans yet. And there were 2,000 or 3,000 that came from the Isle of Skye into North Carolina around 1770. They didn't feel like they were Americans yet. I think that's part of it. Those Scots-Irish, they'd gotten here a little bit earlier, and they were mad at Britain. They left because of Great Britain. That's the reason they were in America, was the British king, the crown, and its policies. They had a very different attitude. So that's the best I can explain it. Culloden was 30 years ago. People had forgotten it. There were a few veterans of Culloden in the States and North Carolina, but only a few. And
Don,
some of them will probably regret it ever being a Jacobite.
Yeah. Don, if I might, I'll just, since most people won't be there, let me just, if I could, take a couple seconds and tell you what I'm going.
Take several minutes.
Remarks.
Take several minutes.
So I'm going to do some welcome remarks at Moores Creek, and I'm supposed to do under a minute. But I'm also supposed to introduce Diana Gabaldon, and I'm supposed to sum up the Loyalist role in this. So I kind of have distilled it down to a little bit. So I'm going to say, as we gather here today, we stand on ground shaped by choices made 250 years ago, choices that helped set North Carolina and the nation on a path toward independence. The Battle of Moores Creek Bridge reminds us that the revolutionary story is not simple, and that the people caught up in it were navigating complex loyalties, identities, and hopes for the future. The Scottish Highlanders who marched towards Moores Creek in 1776 were recent immigrants to the Cape Fear region, drawn here by the promise of land and stability after years of upheaval. Their defeat at Moores Creek proved decisive, effectively ending royal authority in North Carolina and setting the colony on the road to becoming the first in freedom. Within a generation, the same immigrant community would be deeply woven into American civic life, a powerful reminder that history is rarely a matter of heroes and villains, but people making difficult choices in uncertain times. So,
Catherine, well said. You should have given this talk.
no, I don't know anything about John Bethune.
That was well composed.
Had to distill it down into as few seconds as I could possibly.
Very good. Very good.
Do. Yeah, because it's an interesting dichotomy for me. My role in this, I am, as president of the Scottish Society of Wilmington, it's my role to recognize the Loyalists. So when I honor the wreath at the Loyalist monument, you will see me bow my head and then look up. And I am apologizing to my 17 patriot ancestors for honoring the Loyalists. And I wear my DAR. These days I wear my DAR badge because the DAR people used to look at me like I was a chicken with no head or something. Or they wanted to take my head, one or the other.
I give a talk occasionally at a DAR meeting.
John, I'm interested
And
to hear
they're
a
all-
little bit more about the Marriage Act of 1793. So that was a government policy.
That was a Canadian. That was a Canadian
oversaw
government.
church.
They suddenly allowed the Presbyterians and other denominations to fully marry people. It had been suppressed till 1793.
Was this Canadian or British or?
It was Canadian policy.
Okay.
Well, it was really, Canada really wasn't well formed at that point. So it was really probably influenced the crown as well as the Canadian province. Canada was largely French at the time of the Revolution. There were not that many English settlers. There were more French people in Canada than English people at the time of the Revolution.
Especially in Quebec.
Correct. I mean, like what is now Toronto didn't even exist as a town, I don't think.
John Cameron's got his hand up.
Yeah. I just wanted to, there was a earlier discussion about, finding Loyalist ancestors in Canada. And I wanted to point out that there's actually quite extensive Loyalist family history and genealogical records. So if anyone is interested in pursuing that, most of them are available online. And you can find out quite a bit. So the Canadians are just as interested in their past as we Americans are. I'd also like to mention that the Canadian Presbyterian Church was distinct from the American Presbyterian Church and of course the American Presbyterian Church broke into different branches, the Southern branch, the Northern branch, the Cumberland branch, but the Canadians actually founded a church in Chicago in the 1870s called the Scotch Presbyterian Church, and it later merged with the American Presbyterian Church, became the Scotch Westminster Presbyterian Church, and it was on the near west side, and it was a locus for many of the Scottish immigrants in the city. So Unfortunately, those records are not available anymore. Apparently, somewhere along the line they dissipated. But there are a lot of Presbyterian church records available on Ancestry, including things, baptismal records, marriage records, records when people joined the church. So if you're interested in at least Presbyterians in the Chicago area, but actually there are also many from across the country, that's a very good resource to pursue.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
A quick question about the churches. Remind us of the history here. Did the Presbyterian influence come from the Church of England? And that's why Scotland was so strongly Presbyterian? Because we know it was a big, big deal to be Presbyterian or Catholic. And it's in a lot of ways, it's still a big deal. But what's the history? Can you share a little on that?
Sure. So the Scottish Reformation was distinct from the English Reformation. The English Reformation began with Henry VIII when he broke with the Catholic Church because he wanted to divorce his wife, Catholic wife, and and find someone who would bear him a son. So that became what we call the Anglican Church, and in America called the Episcopalian Church. The Scottish Reformation began with John Knox, who was trained on the continent in France and Geneva, which was a French-Swiss city, and he was trained under the Calvinist doctrine, which was very distinct from the Anglican approach. And in the mid 1500s, he began really what became the Scottish Reformation, which eventually took many years and many wars and a lot of death before it became the established Church of Scotland. So, and it was called the Presbyterian model because the presbytery was essentially an elected body that governed the church, as opposed to the Episcopal model, which was based on bishops who would be essentially, kind of a feudal prince of the church. So it was a republican as opposed to a aristocratic model of church governance. And there, even as early as the 1600s, there were Presbyterian migrants to the United States, and which formed the Presbyterian Church here, which again, as I said, was distinct from the what would become the Canadian Presbyterian Church. Canada at that time was called British North America, and it of course was not fully independent of Britain until the 1867. So there's a distinct tradition of Presbyterianism north of the border. There's various Presbyterian traditions in the U.S., and some of them, it's very complicated. The Presbyterians were very great about getting mad at each other and forming a new branch of the church. And that happened in Scotland, that happened in the U.S. And, so it's a very complicated history to go through all of them. But essentially, now there's been much more of a consolidation, although there still are various different branches of Presbyterianism in the U.S. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah. So obviously Bethune was a Presbyterian minister and chaplain. So thank you.
Yeah, well, he'd be a Church of Scotland minister, really, when he left. So, and the University of Aberdeen was a very prominent King's College there, which I am also a graduate of. Is a very prominent source of Presbyterian theological education, and many ministers have come from there, including John Witherspoon, who signed the Declaration of Independence. Yeah.
John, thank you.
John and Witherspoon was also president of Princeton University and the first moderator of the Presbyterian Church in the U.S. when they split off because of the revolution. So Presbyterian's very prominent on that side of the equation also.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in fact, I mean, many people say that, that our constitutional model of a republicanism in America was based on, the approach of the Presbyterians in terms of Republican governance. So,
that's especially underscored by the fact that James Madison came up with the Virginia plan that ended up being the model, and Madison was a student of Witherspoon's at Princeton.
Right.
What else? Other thoughts? Well, I'm thinking that since today is Valentine's Day, I bet a lot of you need to get away and get on with your plans. But any more discussion today? This has been fascinating and interesting, and we have so much expertise in the group. It's delightful.
I have
Very much appreciate it.
John Cameron, where do you live?
That my Quaker side of the family was where the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina was fought. The DAR won't recognize him as a DAR ancestor because they can't prove if he supported the British or supported the Americans or supported no one.
Or both at various times, depending.
Don Cameron, did you hear Don's question?
No, I'm sorry.
He's asking you where you live.
Oh, in Chicago. So,
Okay.
No?
yes. And that longtime family in Chicago, but many Scots from various times have converged here. So,
I'm
Thank
in
you.
Greater Chicago myself. I'm Helen. I'd be interested in meeting up with you sometime.
all right. Well, send me you can send me a email in the chat, and I'll give you a contact. So.
Okay. And come to the genealogy group at Caledonia. I'm generally there.
Okay.
I have to ring off, folks. I've got
Okay. I
things
think we
to
will go ahead
wrap up.
and conclude. I just want to thank Don. Don, this has been excellent as always. Everything you touch is just very well researched and interesting. So, Don, we appreciate you so much and thank you. And I want to thank all of you for being with us today and keeping this august group of thinkers going. And we'll look forward to convening with you again next month. And so until then, please be safe. God bless. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Honey, I wish you the best with Hope, and I hope he gets out soon.
See you in 2 weeks, Catherine.
Yes.
Bye.
Randy,
Goodbye.
you going down?
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Well done, Donald.
Randy, are you going to Morris Creek?
No, I'm not going to be able to because of Pam's issues, her mobility
sorry.
issues. Yeah.
Sorry.
Wish I could, but.
Good tidings to all.